Yeah, first thought was like, oh my God, they're lying. And then it's like, oh, okay, good. Armageddon's not coming.
Was born and raised into it and fell asleep listening to my book of Bible stories and Great Teacher cassette tapes. That's like my earliest memories are all witness related for the most part. In the social hierarchy around where we live, if I went to a congregation to give a talk, like as a ministerial servant to give the Sunday public talk, and they said my name, there were always people who knew people in my family. The thing that I wrestle with now is, did I ever really believe it? But I think I must have, because I sure acted like I did, and I tried to, and I did all these things that I didn't really want to do. Like, I didn't like going in the field ministry ever, really. Like, the more I looked into the publications to try and restore my faith, to try and get back to first principles and be like, why is this the truth, the less convinced I was.
This is a must-watch episode, so be sure to stay to the end. This is Caesar Awakening. Thanks so much for watching. I'm the host of my channel. This is your home for ExJW tales, stories from people who walked away from the high control legion known as Jehovah's Witnesses. Please comment, like, subscribe, smash that notification bell, or share this interview. Today's guest goes by Jake Vaughn. He's also known in YouTube circles by AltWorldly, which is his YouTube channel. He's fairly popular, but what's most impressive is his knowledge about the history, about Jehovah's Witnesses, and about his reasons for walking away. He's done his research, and he shares all his findings with us. He shares his thoughts on the governing body, and also talks about the novel that he's working on. So make sure you stay to the end, and let's meet Jake now and learn more about his story. All right, so we have a special guest. This is the OG of ExJW YouTubers, I'd say. So Jake Vaughn, thanks so much for making some time. You may know him as AltWorldly.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm sure you've been doing this for a while. So let's start off with like, what are the big changes that you've seen in the organization since you sort of started this journey?
Oh, that's a good question. I should say that like when I first started deconstructing, which we can talk about later, there were YouTubers. There are definitely YouTubers around who are more OG than me, like JT and Lady C, for example. Um, XJW Fifth was a YouTuber I watched when I first started. Um, as far as changes go, yeah, when I was first disfellowshipped for apostasy, there was none of this stuff that they have now where at the meeting you can talk to a disfellowship person for a second and say hi. Um, I mean, you have to go back to shunning them after that, but you can say hi. Like that hadn't happened yet. There were some teachings about Armageddon that have changed, but I guess the more interesting change is like the beard thing. Like I grew a beard when I left because that was subversive and within the group, not in society, but they've flip-flopped on that, even though it was a teaching of theirs for like 100 years. Um, like dressing at the Kingdom Hall being slightly less mandatory, formal, although I think if you're a ministerial servant or elder, you still have to wear a tie and all that. Um, and then recently there was like toasting. They adjusted that you're allowed to toast your drink, not toasting bread. I should clarify for the audience, like clinking glasses, and then blood transfusions. Recently, they adjusted it slightly so that you're allowed to have an autologous blood transfusion, like you could transfuse your own blood. Doesn't really address the larger problem. I guess that's the trend I would say, is that they've done a lot of cosmetic changes without really addressing the underlying issues of the group.
Yeah, like disfellowshipping and some of the main issues they have with it being a teaching that's not exactly biblical. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so let's go back to how you became a Jehovah's Witness. Let's take it back to your roots. Where are you from and how did you become a Jehovah's Witness?
I'm from Central Ohio, and my family, going back many years, are Jehovah's Witnesses. I think it goes back at least to my great grandfather. So I think that makes me fourth generation, but counting generations is difficult when you're a witness. I'm not really sure. we've got overlapping generations and stuff. But I think like 3 or 4 generations back. And so like all the men in my family were elders or servants for the most part, except for one of my uncles who was disfellowshipped. That was a little weird. That was on my dad's side, I should say. I mean, on my mom's side, still most of the family was witnesses, but maybe not seen as like the pillars of the congregation, which is stupid. I love my my grandparents on both sides of my family, but you know, the kind of social hierarchies that happen in the social hierarchy around where we live. If I went to a congregation to give a talk, like as a ministerial servant to give the Sunday public talk, and they said my name, there were always people who knew people in my family. Um, so it was that kind of family where we were seen as OGs in the community. And I think a big part of it was my grandfather was early part of the RBC, the Regional Building Committee, the kind of volunteer committee of construction brothers who would organize local construction projects to build new kingdom halls. And he helped build a lot of the congregations in like Ohio and Indiana, maybe Kentucky. So they had like the tri-state area kind of covered there from a long way back. And so I was born into it, but it was seen as very normal, right? Yeah, I knew that I was no part of the world, as they say, when I went to school. But my family was very like fun and funny and weren't overly strict compared to some families. I mean, they were strict about some things, which we can talk about, but compared to some of my friends who had much stricter parents, who were more hardline and I don't know, quick to say that's witnesses don't do that. You're not allowed to do that. My family wasn't like that. And so it didn't feel like I was a part of a religion that was bad or anything. I was born and raised into it and fell asleep listening to my book of Bible stories and great teacher cassette tapes. That's like my earliest memories are all witness related for the most part.
Yeah, the indoctrination happens so that you don't even really know that you're indoctrinated into a religion. It's just a way of life.
Yeah, exactly. I see some memes on the internet sometimes that reference when you suddenly gain consciousness at the age of 5. Like I think my earliest memory is from before I was 5. It's like, but it's snowing and it's going to my grandparents' house after sledding. They lived right by the sledding hill. Like that's kind of my first memory. But for the most part, I don't remember any at any point learning any of the teachings really. Um, at least not the basic teachings. That was all stuff that I was consuming from the time I was tiny because, you know, my parents took me to the meetings as a baby. They played kingdom songs for me when I was in the womb. Uh, so yeah, when you're born into it, it doesn't feel like you're choosing it. So I got baptized at the age of 14. That was a little late almost for my family, for people in my family. Like that's obviously you're way too young to sign any legal documents at the age of 14. But yeah, like me not getting baptized until 14, I think was more just weird personal nervousness around, I don't know, being in my shorts in front of a bunch of people, like being in swim trunks in front of a stadium full of people. That was probably more of my issue rather than, well, maybe it's not true. I never really had any strong suspicions that it wasn't true.
I mean, it's framed as the truth, and when that's how you're raised, you just assume that it is, and that everybody they're right and they're wrong.
That'd be crazy. If the truth wasn't true, then what is? We call it that. Yeah.
Hmm. So you got baptized, you said you were 14. So why do you feel like that was kind of late? Because to me, like 18, 19 might be late, or 16, 17.
Yeah,
You know
I guess
that.
you're right. Well, I knew of kids who got baptized younger than I did. And I mean, the real thing that moved me to baptism was my crush, who we were, you know, on again, off again, in the sense that any Jehovah's Witnesses are ever dating by normal standards, right? Like we weren't dating, but we were considered to be dating because we would text and we told each other that we liked each other. She got baptized, and I guess she was probably 13. And I was like, oh, crap. Well, I definitely have to get baptized then because I want
Yeah.
to show her that I'm a spiritual man at 14.
I'm tracking to be minister, servant, or elder.
That's right. That's right. I was appointed as a servant when I was 19, and that was considered young to be appointed as a servant. But there's kind of nepotism in the kingdom halls. Like, you know, it probably helped that my dad and my grandfather and like one of my uncles were on the elder body.
You have that legacy.
Yeah, yeah, you get literally grandfathered in to the program.
And probably in some kind of way, there are some privileges that come along with being the son of elders or the son of families who are kind of well known.
Yeah, it's good and bad because every decision you make as a Jehovah's Witness, you're filtering through Jehovah is watching me do this. And every decision I make is a little battle between Jehovah and Satan. They're both watching, seeing what I'm going to do. And anytime I do something that doesn't live up to Jehovah's Witness standards, that is making the roaring lion taunt Jehovah, right? That imagery of the
Yeah.
lion like roaring up at the heavens.
Seeking to devour someone, you're getting devoured.
I'm getting devoured. Yeah, if I choose to watch that rated R movie or play Grand Theft Auto, that's a win for Satan, right?
Right.
Like that's how you think. But it becomes like that is more abstract than my dad's an elder, and if he gets in trouble, like he will get in trouble because of me.
Yeah.
You can be removed as an elder if your kid gets reproved or disfellowshipped or is known to be bad association, whatever. So
Mhm.
both me and my sister experienced a lot of pressure in that regard. Like it was high pressure being his son or his daughter. But I've definitely viewed it as more of a privilege. Like I don't think that I had any resentment towards kids whose dads weren't elders, because I think on a kind of, well, now I would call it a cynical level, but privileges, as we called them in the organization, are just it's just more extra free labor, but
Exactly.
it's social status. It's
Yeah.
kind of, you are perceived as being
More important.
spiritual. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Even though they say in writing that you're not supposed to view it that way. That's functionally how it works.
Hmm.
And so I saw the idea of like when my dad would go to elders meetings and be in the library with the other elders after the meeting, I was like, ooh, I want to know what they're talking about. I want to be in the club. I want to know. And I think my dad was also a very good elder in the sense of like the biblical sense of being a good shepherd of people. Like he genuinely cared about people. He was a firefighter as his day job, and from a young age, like instilled the values of if there's anybody that needs help moving, you help them
Help them.
move.
Yep.
If there's an older sister that needs her driveway shoveled or her lawn raked or anything like that, you help out. And it's that kind of taking care of people who weren't our close friends or immediate family. Those things struck me as really living up to the values that were preached from the platform. So I wasn't seeing hypocrisy, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
the organization makes hypocrites of everyone because they make standards that are impossible to live up to,
Yep. Yep.
which means at least some of the time you're lying.
And not knowing it, but you are.
Right. And but so I saw the religion as being very good because I saw the
Mhm.
way that we would help people. And then um I had a chronic illness as a kid, and so sometimes I was in the hospital or just sick for a long time, and the congregation would be there. Like they would visit me, but they would also bring meals for the family. And then when we were well, my mom was always making meals for other people in the congregation who were sick or infirm, couldn't come to the meetings. That kind of stuff was what I really liked about the group, was the fact that it seemed like we were a real community that was taking care of each other. Bo. Please don't knock over my things. Come
It's
here.
a cat. It's a cat.
This is Bo.
Hey,
He is
Bo.
our favorite little terrorist. He loves knocking things over when I'm recording.
So let me ask you this. We'll kind of move on at this point, but it seemed like your family was very normal, as normal Joe's Witness could be. They didn't really have a lot of pretension. Like you on Facebook comments, sometimes witnesses will be like, "Oh, you'll see when Armageddon comes when the righteous are
Right.
whatever." You know what I'm saying? Your family seemed like they were very normal in terms of they didn't think of themselves better than others.
Yes, that's very, very true. One of the things that was really eye-opening to me as somebody, well, we can get to my doubts and stuff later, but when I finally felt comfortable Googling stuff or looking up stuff on YouTube, I wanted to see interviews with people. And what was surprising to me, seeing people tell their stories or seeing them on the ExJW Reddit or on Facebook communities, was how many, if not most people, have a completely different experience. It's very charmed and privileged to grow up where that is the case, because there are people who grow up and, yeah, their dad's an elder, but he beats the kids and
Hmm.
the wife when they get home from the meeting. Or there are people whose parents were never um, perceived as spiritual by the congregation, so they never felt like they were in the club. They always felt like they never really had true friends, like they never really fit in. It was, and then of course there are people who just experience abuse at the hands of the organization.
Hmm.
And it was those kind of things that made me realize that my experience was actually somewhat rare. But I would totally agree that for the most part, it wasn't that hard to feel like I was normal. Um, like my parents were good about, when it was the holiday season and kids at school were doing Halloween or Christmas, that we would do stuff together as a family. Like they would take us out of school and take us to Chuck E. Cheese or something, or take us on a little trip to the park, or just do something fun that made us feel like we were special and celebrating something, even though it wasn't a holiday. And
Hmm.
so those kind of things, I think were good, but they were also not, probably not the normal experience for most Jehovah's Witnesses.
100% agreed. So take me to when you first started to question things, or when did something seem like it wasn't right?
Yeah, that's a tough thing to figure out in hindsight, because the thing that I wrestle with now is, did I ever really believe it? Like it, but I think I must have, because I sure acted like I did, and I tried to, and I did all these things that I didn't really want to do. Like I didn't like going in the field ministry ever, really. I always had to talk myself into it. It was always a struggle.
Yeah, I think it
But
is for most
also,
people.
yeah, I must have believed it, because I did. I went and I thought it was important. I commented at the meetings, I gave talks, teaching all this stuff. But I always had little doubts about little things, certain things about the Bible, maybe like the violence in it and how that could be justified. I was bothered by the fact that only men could be elders. I think because I had a lot of reverence for my mom, who was a really, really good teacher. Me and my sister, my mom taught us how to read before we even entered kindergarten. We didn't do preschool. My dad worked two jobs so that she could raise us at home, but she did a great job. And then, of course, I went to school and all my teachers were women. And I was a little nerdy kid who liked to read and do all the things that, you're supposed to do when you're in first or third grade. So I was like, but why? Some of these talks at the meeting are really boring. And I feel like my teachers are really good. Why can't women be teachers in the congregation? But you're given the explanation. There's always an explanation.
Always a biblical reason for it.
Right. And so you kind of have to accept it. I think what started to happen over time is, it's like, okay, I know our reason, but I disagree with this reason. I don't think this is a good reason to be doing this. Like disfellowshipping was something that I struggled with. We had an uncle who was disfellowshipped. Or I'm sorry, I had an uncle who was disfellowshipped and was totally ostracized from the family, except for his twin sister, my aunt. They kept in contact kind of subtly, but for the most part. I mean, I had never hung out with this guy ever in my life. He had totally moved on with his life, lived in another country, was married, had kids, and one of my aunts had cancer, and so he came into town because that was viewed as a family emergency that justified communication, which is important with disfellowshipping or removal, as they now call it. Right? You have to have there has to be an emergency to justify contact, and that was viewed by the family as enough of an emergency. And so I was probably 19 or 20 when I first really met my uncle, and it was amazing. Like, he was great. He looks exactly like my dad, and because he's my dad's brother, could make fun of my dad in ways that were really fun. Like, he just so clearly was part of our family, and his kids were awesome. They were so fun and talented and cool, and his wife was awesome, and he clearly had no ill will towards us at all. And I remember very distinctly driving home from that. It was a long drive home from my aunt's house, and just thinking, like, I was praying on the way. I was like, Jehovah, I don't understand this. I don't understand why I can't have a relationship with him. Wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it help him maybe come back if we treated him better?
Yeah.
But then, I set that aside. You bury that. And so there was just a lot of little things like that ended up culminating a bit more when the broadcasts started. We started to see the governing body on camera more. That was something that at first struck me as, oh, good, we're being more transparent, because we used to not really know anything about the governing body, and that kind of bothered me. So I'm like, okay, good, this is more transparent. Oh, good, they're showing like morning worships on the website now. I always thought that was weird, that you had to be a Bethelite to receive this certain kind of spiritual food. Okay. But then you see the videos and you realize this is the governing body. Like, these are the guys on the teaching committee. They're not very good at teaching.
This all dusty
Yeah,
Mr.
they're
Rogers sounding.
weird. They're weird. And the way I've talked about it on the channel, I think, is like, before, and I guess this is a real generational change that happened when I was a witness. But what I'm kind of starting to appreciate now is like, oh, my nieces and nephews and little cousins, their entire life, like, they grew up where Caleb and Sophia was a thing. Like, I was an adult, basically, or like maybe legally an adult when the first Caleb and Sophia video came out. So I was a little too old to be hyped for that. I thought it was like a fun idea, but the animation was creepy and bad. But for them, they've only grown up with Caleb and Sophia and JW broadcasting. But for me and for everybody in the religion, like, it was a huge change. It was a huge change. And so what I perceived as, I knew it was a worldwide organization because we talk about that all the time. But what it felt like was a local church. It felt like a local community. And then sometimes twice a year, you'd have an assembly where you see, ooh, we're
Yep.
even bigger. There's even more congregation. And then you'd have your
Conventions.
convention. You'd have your regional convention or district convention, and you'd be like, oh, wow, look at all these. Now there's 6,000 to 8,000 witnesses packed in a building. This is so cool. That is something that you can wrap your mind around. And I think when the organization is small like that in your head, you think, okay, well, the things that I don't like about this religion might not be a problem with the religion. It might be like
Local
these
problem.
elders, this
Mhm.
CEO, like, we had a couple CEOs where like everybody hated the CEO. They sucked. They were tyrants and made everybody miserable when they were around. But that never made us question our faith, because like, my dad was an elder. He would talk about it. He would talk, like, people would talk about, we don't like brother so and so. And so it was easy to dismiss in your head, like, well, this is what the organization's talking about when they're saying, like, don't let someone stumble you out of the truth. That's what they mean when they say that, because yes, this CEO is bad, but you know what? In a couple of years, he'll be replaced, and we're praying Jehovah sees what's going on. That's harder to accept when you see on HD, like, that this kind of behavior and oddness goes all the way to the highest rungs of the organization. I always had an issue with the kind of simplistic, patronizing way that people would talk at the assemblies and
Like
the
a third
convention.
grader. Yep, like talking to third graders.
Yeah, I felt like at home in the congregation, it wasn't like that really, because it's not like you were listening to governing body members and then trying to emulate the way that they talked. That
Right.
wasn't really a thing. So like, my dad never talked like that in his talks. He and I like sound very similar. He has a deeper voice, but his talks sound like him talking.
Yeah.
And like everybody in my family was like that. And
Didn't sound slow and robotic or
yeah,
over enunciate his words.
right. I thought that people like that, I was always like, why are they giving these guys talks on the convention and stuff? These are Bethelites. They're not very good speakers. Well, you realize that's how they're taught to speak at Bethel. That's how everybody talks. And so I think all that started to bother me. It's one thing when you see on the local assembly or convention, and they still do these demonstrations where it's, brother and sister Smith from the whatever congregation are asked, hey, will you do a little skit for us on the convention? That feels more like a community theater production. And the dramas used to be like that. They weren't movies. They were just really weird stage plays.
Bible stories, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Bad lip syncing.
Yes, yeah, it's the lip syncing thing. And so it's weird, but it's also like, well, we're not Hollywood. But then it's like the broadcasts come along and it's like, we kind of are Hollywood, actually. And we're going to make these big budget movies that are terrible, but, they have impressive visual effects because we have a bunch of people who work at Bethel for free and will do this work for us. And, the governing body, their egos really come through. I think one of the earliest broadcasts that rubbed me the wrong way, it was one of the earliest broadcasts that happened, was David Splain hosting and talking about how important music is to Jehovah and the organization and how they compose their songs. And then it ends with him conducting an orchestra, like conducting the Watchtower Orchestra, because he talks about how much he loved music as a kid. His life story just came out not that long ago in the Watchtower magazine. And yeah, it's clear that he has a little grudge about the fact that he didn't really follow through on his piano lessons as a kid. Like, that clearly is a part of his ego. And so you started to see these kind of egotistic moments coming from the governing body. And so all of a sudden, the things that seemed like a few bad apples felt systemic. Like, this might be a problem with the whole group. This might not just be a problem with our local group. And I know that was a long answer, but that's the thing that made me start questioning.
So this might be a good time to take a break. We have 8 more minutes so we can keep going. But what was the biggest problem that you noticed as you kind of were in this mode?
That the biggest thing for me was, I guess, twofold. It was the video propaganda that they made. I'm calling it propaganda now. But I'm talking about the demonstrations. The things that used to be skits on stage at the assembly or convention are now high production videos where they, use the JWs as actors and there's music behind it. And when I saw them doing young people ask type stuff, as somebody who was then like in my 20s and was so glad to be done with school because it was so miserable, but seeing them make these videos that are directed towards Jehovah's Witness kids, I had a thought, like at the convention, I remember thinking, this is propaganda. Like, I remember having that thought and then feeling guilty, but then being like, no, I don't like this. I don't like this. And it was Garrett Loesch in one of the broadcasts talking about the ideas of rumors and not listening to apostates, and saying there are people who spread rumors about us online on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We should never look at any of that stuff. And if someone sends it to us, we shouldn't send it to anyone else. But you don't trust it, because Jehovah and Jesus trust the imperfect slave, and they trust that he has the best of motives. So shouldn't we trust the imperfect slave as well? And it just struck me. I was showing this at the congregation. I was a servant at the time. And so a couple times a month, or no, once a month, we would show the broadcast at the Kingdom Hall for the old folks or people who just didn't have internet access in their homes. And I remember sitting there and just being like, this guy just said we, but he's talking about himself. He is the faithful slave. And he's saying that we should obey him, but in a really weird way. And that, like, something really snapped in my brain with that broadcast.
Speaking of Jake Vaughn, also known commonly on YouTube as AltWorldly, he's sharing his Joe's Witness story, his ex-Joe's Witness story, which starts off very benign, but then he sort of started to have some cracks in the pavement when the JW started the broadcasting program with JW Broadcasting on their JW.org site. So after you saw these videos, it kind of made you question the authority. What did exactly did you question? Made you question the videos, or what? How did that lead to your awakening?
It was I was feeling like the compounding effect of a lot of different doubts that I had set aside. A big one was the group's stance on LGBTQ issues, which was not even how we talked about it. It was just, don't be gay.
Exactly. It was known not to the Joe's Witnesses were not homosexual.
Right, exactly. It was just homosexuality bad. And that was tough for me because I consider myself bisexual. I'm married to a woman, and I'd always been attracted to girls, but I'd always had attraction to boys too. That I guess was, like many other things, just easy to dismiss because there was a part of me that could be okay with being straight, right?
Right.
But what bothered me was how it affected other people. And a big thing was just starting to consume media that didn't have anything to do with Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, like, I had always been very interested in comedy. I wanted to do comedy or something, or some kind of performance. I liked writing. I liked artsy stuff. And so I started, just consuming more art made by more people. And, a lot of I would listen to some comedy podcasts and there'd be somebody that was really funny and it would turn out that they'd be gay or non-binary or trans or something. And I would be like, what does it say about me that this person who I think is brilliant and amazing at what they do would find my beliefs detestable? Would I be comfortable defending this belief to someone else? I think that's the thing that I really started getting in my head about, is like, I'm going out there and I'm telling other people this, but deep in my heart, I don't actually believe that.
Right.
I had a real moment. I don't know if I've talked about this in a video or not, but I had a Bible study who I inherited. I never successfully got a Bible study out of just the door-to-door ministry. I can confess now. Yeah, same. Okay. I feel better about that. But I inherited one, and it was somebody who was raised around the witnesses, whose mom was a witness. They had never gotten baptized, and they moved to our congregation because they were going to the university near here. And I think a condition of him going was his mom telling him, you got to go to the Kingdom Hall. So one of the elders was studying with him, but he had a few Bible studies and knew I wanted to reach out to be an elder, or thought I did. And so kind of handed off this Bible study to me, which was good. But we finished the Bible Teach book, the What Does the Bible Really Teach? And then we finished the next one, which I think was the God's Love book. The way it was supposed to work was, if you were studying the Bible with somebody, you studied this one book, which was more an introduction to the doctrines. You studied this other book, which was more about like how to be a Jehovah's Witness. And that was, at the end of that, they were supposed to kind of
get baptized, make a decision.
Yeah, it was a piss or get off the pot situation. Like, you gotta, hey, figure out what you're gonna do, get baptized or not. And so I asked him, and it was uncomfortable. I'd never had to do this before, but I asked him, like, what do you feel is preventing you from getting baptized? And I think at this point I was married or was engaged. I think I was married when this happened. And so we were, me and my wife were perceived as a very good witness couple. And I don't know if that was ever really true, but anyway, he said this. He said the thing. Sorry, I'm like trying to think of. You can cut this of me just thinking.
That's fine.
But yeah, I was trying to play this role of a spiritually mature person, even though I was struggling with doubts myself. And I asked him what was preventing him from getting baptized, because he did seem to believe everything. And he said, well, it's embarrassing, and I've talked to the elders about it, but it's masturbation. I can't stop doing it. And what's interesting, he told me this thing that I had not heard before, but it made me feel a little bit better, actually, is the elders told him, we do it
too.
Yeah, they didn't say that, but they're like, that doesn't actually prevent you from getting baptized. Like, as long as you're trying your best, and then it's kind of okay. Like, that's what the elders told him, which I was like, that's what they said. That's kind of surprising.
Their stories change depending on who they're talking to.
But I realized, that was obviously a huge issue for me, as it is for most people in the organization.
Yeah, I can raise my hand to that one too.
Yeah, I think, that's something everybody can raise their hand to. It's very normal for most people who aren't raised in high control, puritanical environments.
Sexually repressed environments.
Yes, sexual repression. But of course, I felt all this shame, and I felt horrible. A lot of my depression and anxiety and dark thoughts came from just self-hatred and feeling like, why do I keep doing this? Why? And I realized that in that moment, in that Bible study, I was supposed to kind of give him the Jehovah's Witness answer, right? About how he should conquer this habit and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, but I don't believe that. I think it's totally fine. It clearly didn't matter at all, because here I am. Like,
that's why I laughed. I didn't mean to be insensitive when I laughed.
No, because it's surprising. It's like, but he said it, and I guess I was partially just impressed, because I was like, oh wow, I just didn't tell anybody that I was doing that when I got baptized. Right. So I guess, and that made an impact on me, because I was, I guess, just content to lie. But then again, they don't actually ask that, I don't think, in the baptism questions, for good reason, because then nobody would get baptized. But it did bother him. He was feeling the amount of shame that you were supposed to feel as a witness, based on all the articles they write about it.
Yeah. How they frame self-abuse, and
yes. And so that had a real impact on me. And thankfully, it was kind of time to end the study-ish. But actually, no, I think it was really shortly after that broadcast came out with Garrett Loesch that I talked about. And there was also things like, I don't remember the exact timeline, but at some point, I'm at the hospital where I work, and they would play A&E a lot, this channel, in a lot of the waiting rooms or patient rooms. And I saw them play a trailer for the Leah Remini special.
Her cold special on Scientology. And
and I was fascinated by Scientology, and on some level, I think it made me, there was a lot of hype about Going Clear, that documentary and that book that came out that exposed Scientology and went very mainstream. And I was following that kind of stuff. And I think on some level, it made me feel better about witnesses, because it's like, well, we're not that crazy. We don't stalk people.
We're a couple. We're not, exactly. We don't lock them up or prevent them from leaving.
Right.
We disfellowship them, though, and make them feel trapped by the community.
Right, exactly. It was easy to like focus initially on all the ways that we were different.
Mm-hmm.
But then when these doubts started mounting, I started thinking about all the ways in which we are the same. And I really had a moment, one convention, and it was because of one of the videos that was this dramatization of a young man who's clearly like in his late teens or early 20s, who leaves Jehovah's Witnesses on purpose. Like, he writes a letter of disassociation, and they show the parents crying and sobbing. Oh my God, it's the worst thing ever. And they cut to the congregation, and the elders read the announcement, so-and-so is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I had never even thought about the fact that it's the same announcement, whether you resign or are disfellowshipped. I think I had believed the lie that Watchtower tells courts to this day, that it is a personal choice, and that the only people who get disfellowshipped are people who are unrepentant sinners.
Yeah.
And so
It's much more arbitrary than that.
yeah, exactly. And so I reached in my meeting bag for the OD book. We called it the Organized to Do Jehovah's Will book. I don't know if they have a different like organizational instruction manual now,
Yeah, I don't know.
but
I've been
I've
out since like the 89, so I'm way old school.
yeah, oh yeah, okay. So, but that's when I was first baptized. That's the same one that I had probably because it was the same with that kind of pinkish, brownish colored one. You know, that little tiny hardcover book.
Yep.
And then it was the green tiny hardcover book. So I grabbed that tiny hardcover book and I flipped through the rules, and there it is. That the same announcements read, but I just had never thought about it. And I realized sitting there that I was trapped, that I could never leave. I think in my head, I did have a thought that, like, well, I can just leave. I don't have to be a sinner. I'm not going to be an apostate. I could just not be one, as maybe a little backdoor excuse of like, well, plan B is I could just leave. But then it really hit me that no, you can't, not without consequence. And that really started to freak me out. I really, like, from that day onward was like everything in my life is ruled by fear. And what really, really started to bother me was that I was afraid to do any research. And I
That's sort
remember,
of the hook they put in people, like, don't look at the internet, don't look online.
yeah, exactly. And what they say is not this word for word, but their argument is essentially it's so twisted and satanic that it's almost like magic. You will, even if you're strong-willed, if you read this stuff, you will believe it and leave Jehovah's Witnesses. And I started to think, well, that's weird because usually that's not how arguments work. If you're
Right.
comfortable with your argument, and again, this goes to watching stuff on like YouTube, seeing videos of people debunk something, like maybe debunk weird stuff that flat earthers are saying, and almost making fun of them. Like they go through their logic and they're like X, Y, and Z. This is why these people are wrong. And so when I tried to like think of a way that, well, why can't we just address what the apostates are saying?
Exactly.
If it's so wrong, why can't we refute it or debunk it? And so what I obviously wanted the organization to be true, and I was praying constantly. But I guess I just started like the more I looked into the publications to try and restore my faith, to try and get back to first principles and be like, why is this the truth? The less convinced I was. And meanwhile, I was a servant who they used a lot. I would do a lot of like volunteer talks on the meeting if somebody couldn't do it or was absent. And I would give the Sunday talks. I would travel to different congregations and give talks. And meanwhile, like every time I was looking at that outline and trying to plug plot holes, I couldn't do, I was less convinced of the teachings every time. And so I just started to feel a real sense of dread around everything, around going to meetings, around service, around doing anything. And at one point, I just one night told my wife, and I kind of wasn't expecting to say it even, but I was just getting really emotional. It's like, I just don't know if I believe this anymore. And that was the first time I'd ever thought it out loud or said it out loud. I had those thoughts, but something about saying it made it feel more real to me. Like, well, okay, you got nothing left to lose. You might as well look up what people are talking about on the internet.
What's the reaction to you making that confession?
It was not good at first. It was very emotional. And so I immediately kind of backpedaled and was like, well, I have doubts. I don't know. And at that point, like when I told her that, I had not looked at any apostate information ever, except for, once on accident when I got an email and it had like a link to the Australian Royal Commission on it. Kind of a long story. I didn't watch it, but that was another thing that I would just wonder about. Like, what was that video thumbnail of Jeffrey Jackson? I didn't read the guy's email, but I just saw that video existed. And just knowing that it existed and I was afraid to look for it, that bothered me. And so I told her, I've been struggling with this, but I want to be back where I was spiritually, blah, blah, blah. But then that night I got to thinking, I got nothing to lose. And I started doing research. And
Wow.
what I didn't expect was that, as soon as you are in a place where you're willing to accept that something may or may not be true,
Mhm.
and okay, I'm really going to listen in good faith to what critics are saying, it can't hold up to that. And it's what stunned me. I think I was actually trying to find the Australian Royal Commission video, but I obviously didn't know it was called that. I was just like
Right.
searching Jeffrey Jackson deposition, something like I didn't even know what to search for. And an
Right.
interview popped up on ExJW Fifth's channel. He's now a musician. He's a rapper. He
Yeah.
makes amazing music. But he was doing some interviews at the time, like you're doing, and he interviewed somebody who used to write for the magazines and do research for the publications. And so that intrigued me. I clicked on that. And like by the end of that video, I was like, oh, like, I mean, 5 minutes into it, I'm like, oh my God, they're just people. They're just obviously they're just normal people who just
Yep.
don't believe it anymore. And like I went on the XW subreddit and you just immediately see all the little acronyms that they have, like PIMO. And I
Yep.
remember like I hadn't figured out what PIMO meant, but I was like, I think it's physically in, mentally out. Oh my God.
Yep.
And so then I found that and I saw people posting stuff like, I'm literally at the meeting right now at the sound desk and I don't believe in this crap. Well, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that there were people
My peoples, I found them.
on my people. Yeah, it was like, I was a sick kid, and there was a time when I was just really sick, but they didn't know what I had. They didn't know what it was. And so getting a diagnosis was a relief. It was like, okay, well, this is a thing. There's a treatment plan. Other people have gone through this. It's not going to be awesome, but this is at least a thing. I'm
Yeah.
not alone. And that's what it was to me to find extra Jehovah's Witnesses on the internet sharing their experiences was like, oh, thank God. There are people like me. And that interview with a man, Ben Coppola, I've had the privilege of interviewing him on my channel, and I consider him a friend. He and his wife are wonderful people, have been very helpful to me and Christina. But just, listening to him talk, it was clear, oh, this is like every elder that I like. He sounds like one of the elders in my family,
Yep.
who's just like a normal down to earth guy who just tried to make it work. And he was an elder and, got to do stuff for the actual publications, and hearing human beings tell their story. And that, this is before we even get to victims of CSA in the
Mhm.
organization, women who were beaten by their husbands and had to endure that abuse, women who like their husbands were elders, but then the elder husband cheated on them, just all these horrible things that happened to people. I hadn't even gotten into that yet. Once you see that, there's no way to justify it being the truth. And it just becomes a mental game of, well, how long can I tolerate this? Can
Yeah.
I pretend? Can I pretend to believe for the sake of my family? And you try that for a little bit. And it's just I don't even know how to describe to people who have never been through this experience the weirdness of suddenly seeing that all of these people that you know and recognize, suddenly everything they're saying sounds like gibberish.
Yeah.
You realize they were always saying these same things, but you're now hearing it differently. And you just feel like a stranger among the only people you've ever known for your whole life. Like that's just a really weird thing to experience. And it's also just very emotionally bad. Like my mental health was very, very bad during that time.
So let me ask you
Yeah.
this. So you were talking to your wife about your questions, and then hours later found yourself looking at the information online, the apostate, we'll call it apostate information.
Yeah.
What kind of permission did you have to give yourself, or were you nervous or worried as you were looking
Oh,
at your
yes.
first?
I was extremely nervous. My way into it was so like dipping your toes into the hot tub before you get it. Like, it was very much easing myself into it. The thing that had happened, I think that day that really, or maybe a week or two earlier, that had really bothered me and been stuck in my head was I I had listened to this NPR show, Fresh Air, with Terry Gross for ages, like ever since I was a kid. My mom and dad would put it on the radio. We would listen to it. It's just like normal interviews with interesting people. And it just so happened that, so I subscribed to it on my podcast feed on my phone. And the interview one day was with Amber Scora, an author who wrote Leaving the Witness, probably, the most beautifully written ex-Jehovah's Witness memoir. I mean, there's many excellent memoirs, but I saw just the headline of the interview was like, an ex-Jehovah's Witness talks about her former faith. And I had that thought of just like, I'm afraid to listen to NPR, the most milquetoast, uncontroversial radio show. Like, what is happening in my life? And so the first thing I did was I went to NPR.com and I looked at the transcript of the interview because I was too afraid to even listen to it.
Right.
I just like peeked through my fingers and was like looking, and it was like,
Just crack the door open and see what they're doing in there.
yeah. And it wasn't really all that salacious or crazy. Like, she wasn't saying anything crazy. It was just kind of stuff like this that we're talking about. Like, yeah, I believed it for a long time and I took it really seriously. And then
This happened, that happened, and I realized it was all BS.
Yeah. And so that, feeling a little bit safer about that, made me feel comfortable going on Reddit, just because I was already a Reddit user. And I think I was vaguely aware that there was an ExJW subreddit. I obviously had never gone there, but I know at one point I had seen a Reddit post that was just on the popular feed because it was an AMA and Ask Me Anything with a former circuit overseer. And I was subscribed to the AMA subreddit because it would just be like interesting people or people who have a weird or a unique job saying AMA. And then it was a person who's like, I used to be a circuit overseer. I have all of these secret documents. Ask me anything. And so I was like, I got to block AMA. I can't be subscribed to that. So I was just like looking around Reddit for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. So it was Reddit and then YouTube. And from there, Crisis of Conscience, the next day at work, I'm listening to some bootleg recording of Crisis of Conscience on my phone while I'm at work, and listening to the Australian Royal Commission and going down that rabbit hole. Yeah.
So what were you thinking as you were consuming this information?
The first thing I thought, and this is honest, like, because it surprised me that I thought this was, thank God it's not true. I was really relieved that not everybody has that reaction, but for me, I think the fear of Armageddon.
Well, thank God the Jehovah's Witnesses have it wrong.
Yeah. I was so relieved that it wasn't real. I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
That's such a relief. I really thought Armageddon was coming. It really isn't. It was just made up. Oh, I don't have to worry about that. And the sense of betrayal and anger and all that stuff, and then fear of the repercussions of leaving, all that stuff came later. But my first sense was relief. I felt somewhat liberated, but then also incredibly stressed and confused and in just a weird daze for the first couple weeks of that.
I've been trying to put together, like, how do you create a religion and then monetize it and then keep people make a cult out of it and keep people indoctrinated by lies? Like, what kind of person does, and that's part of your business model. What kind of person does it? What kind of businessman does that?
Yeah. I mean, I have theories about that, or I have a take on that. To me, it's like, what we're told the whole time we're witnesses is that this group is really special and it's really different and there's nothing else like it on earth. And your assumption, I think, or my assumption anyway, based on what they say about apostates, is that they've got some crazy conspiracy theory about why the group isn't true. Like, it's going to be some convoluted strings on a cork board kind of thing. And what the reality is is that there's actually nothing special about the group at all.
No, there
That it
isn't.
is just a stupid religion
It's just
business.
like the Adventists. It's just like any other religion, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it is no different from the Mormons. It's no different from the Catholic Church, and I
Yep.
think much like those other religions. Now, Joseph Smith, I can't speak to his intentions, but the Mormon guys who become apostles and all that now, or prophets, I forget the exact language. They're just people who were raised in the religion, did it
Yep.
their whole lives, took it really seriously, went to BYU, and
Stuck with it.
stuck with it because that's your community, that's your tribe,
Yep.
and you end up on the on the leadership, and then what are you going to do? Are you going to blow everything up and lose everything?
You're gonna shit or get off the pot, man. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, and so the governing body, I think you see it very clearly in all of the governing body appointments that have happened since I left. And by the way, another big thing that's happened since I left was Morris being unceremoniously removed without explanation.
Tony Morris, yeah.
Yeah. Anthony Morris the third. And then having his videos slowly deleted from the website, like that's new. But all of the recent guys that have been appointed, like Jody Jadley, Jacob Rump, Mark Sanderson, Kenneth Cook. I think there's somebody else I'm missing, Gage Flegel, Jeffrey Winder. Those are like identical looking, nasally white dudes with no hair. Or I guess Kenneth Cook has a little bit of hair, but like they're all the exact same stock of a nerdy Bethelite who just stuck with Bethel, was willing to do whatever he was assigned to do.
Believe the doctrine. Went out in
Like being in
service.
the boys' club.
Yep.
Whether or not they would, I'm sure they don't see it in those terms, but that's what it is. I think it's an ego thing, and it's the fear that we all have as witnesses. They have that too about, well, what if I'm wrong about the organization being wrong? Then I'm out on my ass. Then I could be shunned, and then Armageddon come. I think that for the most part, like none of those guys had any aspirations of being businessmen, really. They were all, for the most part, born and raised in the religion or joined at a very formative age. And so they just inherit this thing, like the Jehovah's Witnesses is a little society, right? We used to call it the society.
Yep. Bible Watchtower Tract Society. Yep.
Right, exactly. And so that's what it is. It's and when you are in a high control society, a high control group, the status quo is just the air you breathe. That's just the way things are. I mean, it's the same like in our country. There are certain things that as Americans we perceive, well, that's just the way things are. And it's not actually, because other places do it differently, but that's the culture we were raised in. And it's like that for Jehovah's Witnesses. They are a little society, they're a little government. And the people who make it to the top, well, sometimes they're just cynical and evil and lying. But I mean, if you really wanted to be a cynical, evil liar, you could make a lot more money doing it in another religion. I think all these guys on the governing body are just lifelong believers who stuck with it and climbed the ladder, and then they inherit this thing that their job is to perpetuate it, because on some level they must realize that
there's no Holy Spirit.
Yeah. And like what happened to Anthony Morris is so interesting, because it must be a little bit of a fear motivator for the other governing body members, right? Like, you could be gone like that. We'll delete all your videos.
Yep.
We will erase you from the history of the organization.
You'll be deemed an apostate, or no one's going to talk to you again, and you're not going to be welcome back here. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's just like they have all of the same incentives to not look into reality that we do, even more so. And so I don't think that they, like, Jehovah's Witnesses weren't started as a business to be like a long running, infinite growth kind of startup company. Like, that's not what they were. They were a crazy guy with a big ego named Charles Taze Russell, thought the world was going to end. And he started writing religious pamphlets and newsletters with other kind of Adventist curious guys around him who were other religious thought leaders. And if you're trying to make a long running religion, you don't say that the world's going to end as part of your sales pitch. Like give the year. You don't say the world's going to end in 1914, because Charles Taze Russell knew very well that the whole reason why he had a faith crisis was because Adventism had proven all of these, or had given all of these false dates for the end of Armageddon. But Charles Taze Russell's thing was like, well, but what if they just added up the math wrong and I've got it right? And if you just move these knobs over here, ooh, look, it's so obvious. And so,
but just like these measurements instead of this pyramid.
Yes, right. Measure the side of this pyramid and it adds up to, right, like really weird stuff. We can talk about more later or not, but I've written a novel about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, wow.
And it's a fictional story, but it takes place in our world, the kind of world we grew up in. But I read a lot of Charles Taze Russell. I read a lot of his stuff, and what I found really notable about it was around that same time when I started this project, I was doing stuff for the channel where I was debunking some conspiracy theories, including like the idea that he was a Freemason. I wanted to look into that and see if it was true.
I don't think he was really, right?
No. I mean,
yeah.
Russell was a plagiarist. If you listen to James Penton, who is probably our best Watchtower historian ever, I mean, he was an actual historian. He recently passed away, very sadly, but he wrote a couple excellent volumes on the history of Jehovah's Witnesses. And you can watch some interviews with him on YouTube as well. I think on the Berean Pickett's YouTube channel and other places. But his line on Charles Taze Russell, I think, is absolutely right, which is that he had very few of his own ideas. Almost everything that he ever said was just copied and pasted from another group. Mm-hmm. And so he was trying to appeal to Freemason types. He absolutely was. Like, he was a conspiracy theorist who believed in numerology and pyramidology and stuff that is not in the mainstream. And so he did adopt some like Freemason imagery, I think, because that was really popular. Like that, the Freemasons were a popular men's club for upper middle class men. Like that's what they were. And that's what Russell was, but he was not a member. But he preached to Freemasons and stuff. My original point of that was like reading a lot of his stuff. I was also reading like Alex Jones's books and David Wyke, a famous like UK conspiracy theory guy, and they're so similar. Like the way they're written, the way their logic works is like identical. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of conspiracy linking weird little things and doing the if then fallacy. Like, well, if this is true, then we can say that's true. And if that's true, then this other thing is true. So that's what Charles Taze Russell was. I think Rutherford more cynically, wanted to co-opt this thing. But all down the line, Raymond Franz said that the governing body were victims of victims, which doesn't excuse what they're doing. But it is true. Like it's the hurt people.
Yep.
A lot of sexual abusers were sexually abused themselves as children. And that is kind of where the governing body is, like in a mental state. Is there people who, none of those guys on the governing body started this religion. None of them would have, if they had the opportunity to start a cult from scratch, would have created a religion like this.
Right.
But they inherited it. It's like when I became a ministerial servant, I didn't suddenly have new information about the group. Governing body people do. They have more information. The higher up you go, the more information you get. So I have a lot of thoughts on that, because like the idea of how people justify beliefs to themselves and justify contradictions to themselves is probably the thing that I find most interesting in the whole world. I think about it a lot and talk about it a lot on YouTube. And I think the idea that I say this just because it is easy to convince oneself of conspiracy theories about Watchtower. But the reality is they are a a mini society. They're a microcosm of society. And what happens in our society? Uh, it's not a meritocracy. People who are abusive, who do not have strong moral convictions and enjoy obeying authority and having authority over others, those kinds of people make it to the top. And so a lot of those governing body guys, it's hard to say if they believe that it's true now, but the idea that they are, kind of being intentionally evil to some grand scheme,
They're
I
not
think is,
Dr. Evil.
yeah, exactly. Like the idea that any of those guys are smart enough to do anything like that, I think is a little crazy based
Okay.
on what we know these guys are like.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I'm coming from on that, is like they definitely are kind of evil businessmen, but they think that they're they think that they have justifications for telling lies. They think that they are protecting a larger truth or a larger structure. But I think they're deluding themselves just like we were for a long time.
So, Jake, I really appreciate your insights on the governing body. I feel in my heart that deep down they have to know, though, they're really have no connection with God, I feel like.
I think you underestimate the degree to which people can delude themselves into something that obviously isn't true. I, for me, it is an interesting thought experiment. I really do wonder how they justify to themselves, or if any of them straight up know that they're lying. My concern more as an advocate on the internet is that regardless of their intention, these are the material harms that are being caused. Like these are the things that happen to children. These are the things that happen to all Jehovah's Witnesses, because they all face this threat of giving their life because of the blood issue or shunning. This is how, queer children in the organization are treated. This is why there is an issue with, suicide amongst people who leave or are excommunicated and shunned. So that's more of what I think is important. But
That's
I
true.
do think Ray Franz wrote a lot of really interesting things about this subject. Ray Franz, I don't think I mentioned earlier, but just in case there's any newbies watching, is the former governing body member who apostatized and wrote a tell-all book, and he wrote a follow-up book called In Search of Christian Freedom, which is excellent. That book, In Search of Christian Freedom, I'm no longer a Christian, but I recommend anybody read it, regardless of where they're at with their faith journey after leaving the Witnesses, because what he's really asking is it possible to have an ethical religion? That's kind of the central question of the book. Is the Bible students did start as a seemingly sincere group. And Russell explicitly said things like, we are never going to solicit for, no, they did solicit for funds. But Russell said, if we ever run out of money, that is the proof that the organization doesn't work. Like if we start tithing or soliciting
Asking for money, yep.
yeah, pressuring our members for money, that's proof that God's Spirit isn't with us, because that's something only bad churches do. And he also wrote something very striking. Russell did, beware of the word organization. Russell was very skeptical of organized religion. And of course,
Yep.
early Bible students were famous for carrying around those signs that said religion is a snare and a racket. But what Franz was wrestling with was, okay, the stated goal of Witnesses is to get back to first century Christianity. That also happens to be the goal of every single Christian religion. They all think that they're emulating first century Christianity in some way, or at least second century. And so he looks at what was an actual first century congregation like. it wasn't organized. Like the central claim of the governing body from Acts 15, that there was always some shadowy figures up top who were deliberating and passing on rules to everyone else, just isn't true. And most of Paul's letters are him saying, hey, I know you heard this from some other preacher, but here's what I'm saying. Real Christians don't do this, they do that. There were disagreements among congregations, and the early ecclesias, early what witnesses call congregations, are nothing like the congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. They were more like the book study that witnesses used to have. It was a few people meeting in someone's actual home, and it was a more free form,
decentralized,
more expressive, more based on personal expression, more based on prayer, meditation, and of course, works of the Spirit, something that witnesses do not do at all. But even if you get rid of that kind of more supernatural element of it, you're almost talking about like a book club. And so I think the thing that that was a very long wind up to get to I think his point was that power corrupts and power reveals. And it's also in a movement that creates a hierarchy. It is inevitable that domination systems will begin to take
put in place. Yep.
And so what I think of the governing body members, if you think about things from their perspective, think about someone like Gage Flegel or Jacob Rumpf, recently appointed guys who were born and raised in the religion. If you think about the world from their perspective, everything the organization has taught them has worked out so amazingly well that they literally ended up on the governing body. That's pretty good. They followed the direction, probably sinned and lie about it like all of us. I don't believe that any of those guys have never watched pornography or masturbated. I think if those are red-blooded guys, they definitely have at some point. Whether or not they've done worse things, we don't know in terms of abuse or things like that. But from their perspective, they did the thing that they're now telling others to do. They followed the direction. They were obedient, and they were rewarded. It's kind of the same fallacy that people who are born into wealth think, well, if you just work hard like me, you'll get rich. And it's like, but you had very specific circumstances.
Yep.
You had some advantages. And, not for nothing, all but one of the governing body members, not just now, but ever, has been white and was an American citizen at some point, grew up in a I forget where Garrett Loesch is from, but most of those guys, Austria. Christina's saying Austria.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about that, but most of them grew up very, very.
I want to say
privileged.
Jeffrey Jackson might be Australian.
Yeah, and he was born in Australia. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But these were people who were privileged in life, who got in on this religion at a very advantageous time, and then were very, very lucky that they weren't part of the house cleaning that Bethel does. Every once in a while, Bethel is like, we can't actually afford to have this many people doing stuff for free because we're going to cull a bunch of people from the ranks. Those were guys that were, for whatever reason, maybe it's because they were sycophants and just did this, they sucked up to the people in power. Maybe not, but I think from their perspective, they have every reason to believe that they're right, other than the obvious fact that they keep on having to change their
interpretations. Right.
One thing that's really weird, and I don't understand. I mean, I'm trying to talk about this in a way that won't freak out somebody whose first video this is that they've ever watched. Like, I was thinking about myself watching a video for the first time. I think probably if somebody's watching something like this, it's not because they love David Splain.
Right.
Like they probably have to. So for me, David Splain is the most. Him and Jeffrey Jackson
Not
are the
Stephen
most.
Lett.
Stephen Lett is such a weird freak. I don't even know what his deal is. Like, but David Splain, like, there's something seems really wrong with Stephen Lett. Something seems wrong with his brain in a way that I don't even understand. But David Splain seems self-aware on some level, and he just seems like a slimy used car salesman. And then, of course, you had Jeffrey Jackson, who lied about, like, under oath in the Australian Royal Commission. I
See,
think the
I think that maybe he wasn't lying, though. Maybe he was telling, he said that we really know that Joe's Witnesses aren't the only way. We tell other members that it is. That's how I took his statement.
right. Well, I think that you're right. I think. Well, no. I think I do disagree because what I think he was doing there was saying what you are supposed to say as a Jehovah's Witness. If somebody were to ask you that,
Oh, I
I
see.
mean,
Yeah.
obviously, as a Jehovah's Witness,
That's the
you do
public
think
line,
that
but that
you're
might
right.
not be the company line. That's the
Yeah,
public
like
facing line.
they say this in talks, especially about when someone's sick and taking care of the sick, and they'll talk about like pray for the doctors, sometimes, and when we're doing a court case, pray for the lawyers. They may be worldly, but the Holy Spirit can use them too. That's,
Yep.
I think, what he was saying was the company line. And when Angus Stewart in that hearing is asking him about, like, okay, he was really good about trying to nail Jackson on a specific that absolutely can and has happened, which is, okay, you have not been disfellowshipped, you have not sent in a letter saying you're no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you don't want to be shunned by your family, but you're no longer going to meetings, so you fade, right? Jackson says that's fine, people can do that, no problem, you won't be punished. We know that's a lie. And so Angus Stewart's like, okay, what if an elder comes by for a shepherding call and sees that that person has a Christmas tree? Would they get in trouble? And Jeffrey Jackson's like, no. And that is also a lie. That's like
that is
specifically, yes, you can get in trouble for that.
right.
But he knows that if he said, yeah, you can get in trouble for that, then it would make him look really bad. So what's he going to do? He's going to say, no, we don't believe that, because deep down, I just think that all of their behavior is exactly the same things that all Jehovah's Witnesses do, which is like when somebody asks you about something that's unpleasant about the religion, reflexively, you kind of say that it's not true. Like, one thing that they say all the time is like, people in the world claim that we let our children and babies die because of the blood issue. But what they don't think is that we have all these other treatment options. And it's like, that's not a refutation of what the person's saying. Like, because if those other treatment options don't work, then yes, you will let your kid die, and you have, and you've like interviewed the parents of those kids on the broadcast. Like, but people lie to themselves. People can break their own brains, and that is what I feel pretty strongly, is that people can, I don't want to get into any like political examples or anything, but like on the conspiracy thing, right? Like with flat earthers, the amount people sincerely believe that, and usually it's not like a little kid, it's somebody who's like a grown adult who goes down a weird rabbit hole, and it just, people can break their brains and convince themselves of things that aren't true, and it is harder to convince somebody that they are wrong than it is to convince somebody of a thing. Like, it's easier to bamboozle someone than it is to convince them that they have been bamboozled. I think that's a Mark Twain quote.
Yep.
I've butchered, but I think that's just true of them. Like, on an ego level, psychologically, we protect our beliefs and we protect kind of the status quo in our head. And the more people, I guess it's just a sunk cost fallacy, right? The more that you have invested into a thing, the more you have to lose. There are people who followed Sam Bankman-Fried to the ends of the earth, despite Sam Bankman-Fried being pretty obviously a con man to most people, and his entire thing being really stupid to most people. Everyone's like, that's a total scam, right? But there are people who invested all of their money and their family savings and their kids' college funds into this obvious scam.
Yep. It
Because
happens every day.
it's gambler's mentality. It's
Yep.
like, that's the one thing I wouldn't say superstitious about, but like, I've never gambled, and I just am kind of like, I'm not going to tempt myself with that.
I don't even like gambling, bro. I don't like to play with the house's money, with my money, anybody's money.
Exactly. I'm like, no, I'm not giving money to that. Now, how is that different than me just buying a video game that's $70? I don't know. I guess if I took that same money to a casino, it doesn't matter. But, you know, people, I think the reason why I want to be clear, like, conspiracies do happen. And there are just liars who will lie about stuff. Like, no question. But what I think in my research into people like L. Ron Hubbard or Keith Raniere, who did NXIVM, or Jim Jones of the People's Temple, I was really interested in those guys. I remain very interested in those types of people. L. Ron Hubbard in particular seems to me like somebody,
the cult leaders.
The cult leaders. Yeah, why am I interested in them? I don't know.
I don't know.
But L. Ron Hubbard specifically, I think when you see Scientology and also see his statement that he made, I think before he had started Scientology, that if you really wanted to get rich, you should start a religion, right? So people are like, well, there you go. He knew it. He knew it. And I think what's interesting about him is no matter what he believed at the outset, by the end of his life, he had totally convinced himself of all of his crap. And I think when people who are in powerful positions and have control over people, and they keep getting away with things, it reinforces to them that they must be doing something right. The thing that I was thinking about centrally, like in the novel, I wrote Wholesome Dread. I'm just plugging it because I'm starting to release chapters of it online.
Please plug it away.
Yeah, I'll plug it at the end. But kind of the central question that I was wrestling with is exactly this thing that you're asking, which is like, how do people justify things to themselves in their own brain?
Yeah.
And doesn't that drive you crazy? Like my feeling is that cognitive dissonance really made me feel crazy when I was really starting to doubt. And on one hand, I'm going to meetings and I'm saying this is the truth and I'm singing the songs. But on the other hand, I have deep, serious concerns. And I'm like, there's no way this can be true. And that is so psychologically damaging to you. But there are people who have those moments and they double down
on the fallacy.
Yeah. And what I was really interested in was like that question of sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm like, why did I bring that up? In terms of like really believing something and the difference between really believing something, pretending to believe something, what's the difference between those two things? And I kind of think that they're not really different. I think that part of being a believer is the play acting, which you don't think of as play acting. It's like, this is what we do as Jehovah's people. But suspiciously, when you stop doing those things, you drift away from the organization. You have to be engaged in the role-playing element of it to continue to be a firm believer. There are people who retain some of the beliefs after fading away or being disfellowshipped.
Definitely, yeah.
Physically out, mentally in people. But those are people who have internalized the belief system, right? They are accepting the narrative that the group told them, that they are worthless and no good, and they will die in Armageddon. I had a conversation with a friend of mine from like teenage years, young 20s. I had heard that she was disfellowshipped. I was recently disfellowshipped, and so I had talked to her, assuming
she was out,
that she was out, like mentally out, but she wasn't. She is now much, much happier. But I was just stunned talking to her. Like, her whole attitude was,
I have to get back.
her whole attitude at the time was, I know they're right. But I'm
I
just going
can't
to
do
die in
right.
Armageddon because I can't
Yep.
do it.
Yep.
And I couldn't talk her out of that mentality. She worked it out eventually, but so many people believe that. And I think you've probably experienced this. I think most of the weird comments that we get on our channels are not from people who are going to the Kingdom Hall, but from people who used to go to the Kingdom Hall and have this very unresolved abusive ex that they're hanging on to. And they're defending their
So
abusive.
trying to defend their thoughts, defend their beliefs.
Yeah, they're defending their family that's shunning them because they have now internalized that they deserve the shunning.
Yeah.
That was a totally incoherent series of statements, but I guess
it all ties together in some kind of way. So, Jake, we haven't really gotten into how you got disfellowshipped or what led to that or how that process went. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I was physically and mentally out for a long time. But like we've been talking about, it was not a good headspace to be in. It was very psychologically damaging. So I talked to my wife about how I was feeling, and I told her that I didn't feel comfortable going out in the ministry anymore because I didn't want to preach things I didn't believe. And she was very understanding of that. And next was the meetings, and that I kind of lucked out in a perverse way because the COVID pandemic hit. And so it was Zoom meetings, everyone was at home. And so it was easy to just, my wife is now also an ex-Jehovah's Witness. So there's a happy ending there. And also, neither of us was upset about just putting the Zoom meeting in the corner and playing video games while the meeting was happening. So that was okay. But I did feel like I was kind of losing my mind. And also it was the pandemic. So at work, there would be hours and hours with nothing for me to do for the first time ever. And so I was just writing a lot. I had to be there, but I had to, I would be called into an operating room. I'm like a tech of sorts. And so I would be on call if they needed me.
Like a hospital tech?
Yeah, but they didn't need me a lot of the time. So I would just be in the cafeteria on my laptop writing for hours and hours. And so I was writing down, research that I was doing. I'm trying to kind of compile things for myself. I started writing basically breakdowns of their frequently asked questions articles on the jw.org website. And I started to get an urge to make a little blog where I could post these. So I did. jwfaq.org and or com. I think both of those work, but it's basically a response to every FAQ article on jw.org, kind of written in the dispassionate way that JW Facts is written, which is still the best. And I know I talked about Reddit and YouTube earlier, but jwfacts.com, absolutely essential. And everybody should go to that if they're in a position where they're questioning or looking to help someone else see what's wrong with Watchtower teachings. But then I started writing things that felt like maybe they were more of a video script. I've been curious about doing YouTube for years, but always felt like, well, but what would my thing be? Because I don't even really know how to do YouTube. If I wanted to talk about my like personal interests, like film and video games and stuff, I would be the absolute worst YouTuber in the world because I don't know how to do videos like Lindsay Ellis or Jacob Geller or whatever. And so but then I started thinking, well, I do have something to talk about now, this ex-Jehovah's Witness stuff. It'd be a good opportunity to learn how to do YouTube. And so I just started figuring it out.
You just got to do it. You just got to do it.
Yeah. And I had one thing you realize when you leave the group is how much time was taken up by JW stuff.
Real talk.
No matter what your role is in the organization, the amount of time you are spending between going to meetings, service, personal study, keeping up with all the stuff on the website, and just congregation stuff, like whether it's get-togethers or helping people in the congregation, it's everything. So I had all this free time, and I started making videos where I just used my voice, didn't show my face. And then, after like a year of doing that, or I don't even think it was a year, but I showed my face because I was at a point where I was like, I know what's probably going to happen. I'm probably going to be shunned, but I kind of feel like I need to know for myself if my family is really willing to shun me over my sincerely held beliefs. Like, are they really willing to lose their son over a YouTube channel? I feel like I need to know that, because maybe I'm wrong. And if I make a really heartfelt, impassioned video where I talk about why I'm doing this, maybe
You'll understand.
they'll understand. Now, that of course did not happen. They did not
Of course
understand.
not. Of course not.
And that video got found by the elders like
Yeah.
immediately, and I got called by the elders like the next day. And so the actual disfellowshipping process, like the judicial committee, you can watch on my channel. I recorded it and also explained why I did it. I had listened to other people who had recorded their judicial committees and thought they were absolutely incredible. Like, they just totally expose how culty and weird the religion is, yes, but also how ill-equipped the elders are to deal with any sincere criticisms of the belief, and that there's no Holy Spirit behind those guys. They are just guys who are repeating the talking points that they were given.
Mhm.
And I wanted to kind of demonstrate that on purpose by trying to be as good faith and patient with them as I could be. And a lot of like that, to this day, I get really nice comments on that uh, recording, because I think not really anything I said, but hearing the elders being unable to deal with anything, like, it's a valuable exercise. I don't think that anybody should put themselves through a judicial committee unless they want to do that for themselves,
Mhm.
And it was something I wanted to do for myself because I was close with all those elders. It was important to my parents that I do the judicial, like that I do things by the book. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to do it. Um, but only if I could record it. So I did. And so it was very, very painful, but also a huge relief. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. And I will say one thing I was determined to do was to not be the image of the unbelieving husband in the publications. Like, there, I always remember this publication that has this picture of like a woman on the couch, or like she's in the corner of the room crying and reading her Bible while her husband is like laying on the couch with like 10 beer cans on his belly. Because obviously, if you're not a Jehovah's Witness, you're just a deadbeat. And so I tried to be more present than I was previously. I mean, after all, I wasn't doing a bunch of congregation stuff, so I had no excuse. So I had to be present. I had to be a good husband, and I wanted to demonstrate that. Um, and also, me and my wife, I really betrayed her trust in a way that I still really deeply regret. I would not recommend, and I always say this, like, if you're watching this and you're PIMO, don't do what I did. It's not, tell the people that are close to you how you are feeling before you post it loudly on the internet, because
Before you post the video, tell your wife.
yeah, and she kind of knew, but I wasn't fully honest about it.
Oh, I see.
And I mean, it's not like an excuse, but it was like, I I think I also needed to know, like, on some level, I guess I wanted to test our love. Like,
Mhm.
this, I feel like there shouldn't be a red line. Now, I don't feel that way anymore. I wish, right, like, I shouldn't have done that. But what it did was it caused us to have a lot of really good conversations that were very painful, but we found a way to communicate without getting into arguments about the religion. I have my differences with Lloyd Evans, but something that he said uh, had an impact on me when he talked about what was going on when his wife was a witness and he wasn't, which is that he would not bring up organizational stuff. But if she brought up something, then he might use that opportunity
To interject. Yeah.
to, maybe ask some questions, in a non-confrontational way. And so I took that to heart. I also listened to this very good ex-Mormon podcast called Marriage on a Tightrope, I think, about mixed faith relationships, like ex-Mormon and present Mormon couples. And it's very, very similar dynamics. And what they talked about was using the language of, this doesn't work for me. Here's why this doesn't work for me. Like explaining it from the point of view of yourself, and not being like, how can you not see this? Or why do you believe this? Don't you ever think about this? Putting it in terms of like, if they bring up something as a proof point, you can be like, here's why that doesn't work for me. It's because of this, this, and this. And that is okay if you believe that. But for me, I am not convinced of that. And so the journey was both very fulfilling in that it brought my wife and I very close. Even when she was in and I was out, our marriage was like, we communicated better than we did before. And we were always pretty good communicators, but it definitely brought us closer. And I think now that we are both ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, it's really like, because we had those hard times where we really were not on the same page, it's given us a lot of gratitude for the way things are now, that we are on the same page about things. And it's allowed us to become better communicators. So if there's any like people listening out there who are PIMO and they're married to a believer, there's no guarantees about what's going to happen, but it can work out. So I tell people, you just got to do what you got to do, but don't give up on your partner because you are literally the person that they're closest to in the world, and they love you. If you're in a shitty marriage that you don't want to save, sorry, I don't know if I should curse, but if you're in a bad marriage that you don't,
it's fine.
Okay, I curse too much on my own channel, and then I try and clean it up, but I forget. But yeah, if you're in a crappy marriage that you don't want to remain in, obviously you should get out of it. But if you're like, oh my God, I hate the religion, but I love my spouse.
Yeah.
Well, then you should really take that seriously, because like you can't change somebody's mind for them, but you can give them the scaffolding. You can give them space, and you can give them the building blocks for critical thought. Like you need an on-ramp to thinking critically, and we all had that. Whatever your story is, you had that for yourself, and it's just it's not going to be the same thing for your partner. It's already different because
individuals, they're different people.
Yeah. And that's what I found, was Christina's relationship to the religion, and like the things that she held dear about it were different than the things that I did. I think a lot of it probably due to the gender dynamic of like, because I was, well, it still am, but men in the organization are able to have these privileges and be a part of this machinery of the organization in a way that is just very different from women in the organization.
The supportive role that women have.
Yeah, they're kept out of it, but maybe it's the communal aspect, or maybe the meditative aspect, the friends and whatever. Like
social group,
it's just going to be different for different people. Like some people, for me, the fact that the Bible prophecy stuff didn't add up, very, very important, because my conception of the group was that we had the most accurate teachings,
interpretations,
that truth meant it was true. But I think there are some people who are like, yeah, that stuff bores me. I don't care about Bible prophecy. I care about the brotherly love aspect of it, and it's just different. So yeah, but that was my journey. Like, shunning sucks, it's terrible, but you get used to it.
So what finally got your wife to, did you just slowly just talking to her, just critical thinking, asking her questions when she brought up topics?
I really didn't ask her stuff. Sometimes we would talk about it. We mostly just didn't have those conversations. The things that she left, I don't want to tell her story for her, but um, it ended up being much more to do with her seeing how I was treated, and
Yeah,
I think more so how she was treated because of me, you
right.
know, that she was treated differently because of me, but she could see that I hadn't changed at all. Like I was the same person. They
She
would
knew that you weren't like a roaring lion seeking to devour someone. You were just the same old you.
right, exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
and also she lost her father, so I lost my father-in-law. It was very sudden
Mm-hmm.
and shocking and absolutely devastating, terrible. And so me, an apostate, I was actually kind of like, it actually is kind of nice that the congregation's here for her. I'm glad if the resurrection gives her hope, that's great.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that it was actually not doing any of that. All of that stuff was making her be like, this is so fake. This is so artificial. They're
Oh,
they treat my husband like he's dead. He's literally not. But my actual dad is dead, and they're kind of acting like he's alive because of the resurrection, all that stuff. So it was all of these very different things than what I experienced. Um, but yeah, she can. I'll let her speak for herself about other things.
mm-hmm.
But that she said that stuff on the channel, so I think I can repeat it.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
So let's talk about your YouTube. So I know you have a lot of like you've been on YouTube for a while. What do you attribute your success to, or how'd you grow your channel? Would you just start making videos and just saw where it went?
I I like I had creators that I liked. I think anytime you start doing something creative, you're just kind of copying your
Mm-hmm.
influences. And so I was very influenced by a channel. It's just called Sean, just Shaun, and he made these very dry but witty videos. There's not a bunch of footage happening. He'll throw up graphics on the screen, but it's just him talking. Another channel I love, it is also weirdly just called Jose. Most of the channels I like have normal channel names.
One name, one word names.
Yeah, but those two guys, like their channels were very. I was watching that and I was like, that seems like something I could actually make if I tried. Whereas,
Mm-hmm.
if I look at people who are really good at editing and know about film and lighting, I can't do any of that.
Yep.
But I felt like, I mean, the channel, like compared to other XJW channels, it hasn't been like that successful in terms of numbers or anything. But what is so meaningful to me about it is, you know, it it's helped me feel less alone. It's helped me connect with people. It's helped other people feel less alone and feel seen. I wanted to create the kind of thing that I wanted to exist. Like when I was watching XJW YouTube videos, like there are all these great channels that I love, but I was like, I think I want something that's more in the style of the kind of funny stuff that I watch. That's a bit
Mm-hmm.
more focused on um having a personality to it
Yep.
that isn't so stuffy. I think there's and there's a very valid reason to approach video creation this way. And I still, if I'm making a video that is more directed at Jehovah's Witnesses, I adjust my tone. But um, it can cause some channels to almost sound like there's still an elder talking to you, or there's still
Mm-hmm.
a regular pioneer sister in the congregation. And I didn't want to sound like that. I wanted to make sure it really sounded like me. And I like channels that are driven by not just what the person is saying, but I like the way they say things. And so that has just been a learning process. But um, I guess the goal was to not be the biggest channel, but to like be somebody's favorite. And that's been that's been fun. Yeah, it's been great. And I genuinely like doing it in a way that, like, I'm glad I started doing this because I really enjoy the process of editing. It's
Yep.
fun.
Yep. It takes a while, but it's fun. It is.
Yeah, like there's a kind of methodical
Process to
nature
it.
to
Yep.
it that is
Yep.
kind of like putting a little puzzle together that's kind of fun. And I wouldn't have thought to ever try that if I hadn't been, just, physically and mentally out Jehovah's Witness.
Yep. So at this point, we have some hot seat questions I'd like to go over with you if you're
Okay.
ready for them.
Yeah, it's like speed round.
Yeah, speed round. So tell me about the moment you realized that Joseph. What were you thinking the moment you realized it was a cult, or what led to that?
I thought, thank God it's not true. I was actually relieved. First thought was like, oh my God, they're lying. And then it's like, oh, okay, good. Armageddon's not coming. That's a relief.
Hmm. What's the most valuable lesson have you learned in life?
Whoa. I have to, okay. Well, this is a speed round. So the thing that's coming to my head first is that everybody is human and nobody is all that much of a genius and nobody is all that stupid either. We're all gullible and we're all capable of doing better. And sometimes that helps me be empathetic, sometimes not, but I think if we all treated each other more like human beings that are capable of being better, then we'd be better off. I think that's probably the best lesson.
Mm-hmm. Last question. If someone's starting to question, what would be the first thing you would say to a witness or someone who has questions about their faith or about whether or not it's the truth?
I would say that truth does not fear scrutiny and it doesn't fear criticism. Um, People already know that to be true. Nobody's afraid of what, um, let's see, like Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the Earth is a sphere, that it's a globe. They're not like terrified of what flat earthers are saying. Just to keep that theme of going, they wouldn't be afraid to listen to that for fear that they would be suddenly convinced that the Earth is flat. That's because they have enough confidence in their reasoning skills that they're not going to be swindled by it. Um, and if you have the truth, it should be true no matter what, right?
It should be true
And
then, and it should be true now. Really, it should be.
yeah, and the first thing I would ask, I think, is do you care? Do you care if you're wrong? I think that's the first question, and not everybody says yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you think about all the? I know we started this conversation off with the changes. What do you think about all the changes that they've made recently?
Um, what it seems to me is, and it kind of fits with my theory that these are just idiots making it up as they go along because they inherit this thing and
Yeah.
all of a sudden they have to be the CEO or 1/10 of a CEO of a big corporation. I think that, like all Jehovah's Witnesses, they have their little pet theories, things that bother them, and things that they would change if they were in charge. And so when new people get in charge, they will flip flop back to something else because, I mean, most men in the organization thought the beard thing was stupid. It probably wasn't all that long before there were enough men on the governing body to be like, we can change this beard thing, right? Um, or like when it comes to their interpretations of prophecies, because I do cover that stuff on the channel, every time I look into it, it's almost never a new interpretation. It's almost always reverting back to something that Russell or Rutherford or Noor said. Like it's almost always a flip flop. And I think that's because they're like, no, when I was growing up, we had it right. We shouldn't have changed it to this thing. We should go back to this. And so I think a lot of the changes like that are just because they're egomaniacs who want to just change little things. But I think the cosmetic changes, or the changes to things like shunning, like I'll go back to Ray Franz. He said in response to somebody asking him this that they'll move the furniture around, but when you look at the building, it's not changed. They will change cosmetic things. They will
Mm-hmm.
change details, but they won't change the underlying problem. So they may adjust the dial on what requires a person, or like what counts as being a full-time servant, what counts as being a pioneer, what count, like whether or not we have to write the number of hours we do on our service report. The underlying thing is, if you're not going out in service, and then you're going to be judged, because that's what you got to do. And yeah, we can change the blood thing a little bit, but hey, you're still not allowed to take a transfusion of somebody else's blood. That's kind of a problem. Maybe they'll change it. Maybe they'll get rid of that. And that would be genuinely good if they did. But I don't think they will, because I think they're cowardly. I think that they might change it to a conscience matter slowly, and hope that it goes away and that they don't get sued by parents who have lost their kids to this blood doctrine or whatever. And so I think it's a little mix of, they know what their PR problems are, but the only way to solve them would be to fundamentally change and do a different kind of group that is not a cult. They're not going to do that. So what are they going to do? They're going to make superficial changes to appear less culty to outsiders. And that is, if anyone hears from their JW parents now and then, that's the line from people in the organization, is like, we're nice now, we're nicer. It's such a more welcoming and loving organization. And they seem to have no introspection about the fact that, like, well, what does that say about the people who believed the stuff before? Like, what does it say about you that it wasn't loving and people suffered because of this thing that at the blink of an eye they can change? So I think it's on one hand, it's PR, and on the other hand, it's the kind of little changing around scriptural interpretations that every new governing body does.
If you're going to throw on your magic hat, what would you say the next change is going to be?
You know, some people think it's birthdays. I don't think it's birthdays. I mostly don't think it's birthdays, because they just made this really high production Caleb and Sophia video about birthday cakes and stuff. And all these kids have watched it. And I think that would be pretty tough to explain to, like, all these parents are showing this to their kids. I think that the holiday celebration stuff is so key to their identity, because it is
it
symbolic.
differentiates them from other religions and from other faiths.
It's really their only distinctive quality. You know, it's the only thing keeping them from being Seventh-day Adventists, basically, is like these weird little specifics. And so I think they're going to keep that for the identity alone, and also to not invalidate the self-sacrifice of all these witnesses or parents who are currently raising their kid and have denied their kid 10 birthdays. Like, what, on your kid's 11th birthday, it's like, oh, the governing body changed their mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's have some birthday cake.
Excited, but maybe they'd be like, hey, my kid's been giving me hell for 10 years about birthday parties. This is a little awkward. So I think a lot of the reasoning is more cynically motivated on perception than anything else, because that's the one thing we all know about JWs. It is all about appearances. It is all about perception. And the governing body's perception of how they are seen by the outside world is totally weird. It's totally crazy. But that is a truism of all cult leaders. They have no self-awareness as to how they're viewed by the public.
Jake, let me ask this. If someone wants to reach out to you or look at your content or maybe learn more about your book, where should they go?
They should go to, so they can email me at exjwfaq@gmail.com, exjwfaq.com, or sorry, at gmail.com. The website is jwfaq.org. My YouTube channel is AltWorldly. If they put in my name, Jake Vaughn, it'll probably come up. And the book, I'm going to be posting more details about it soon, but I am posting it on Substack. It's at Wholesome Dread, those two words. And it is a horror novel. I got obsessed with horror after leaving because I was too afraid of it as a witness. And I was watching all these demon possession movies and reading demon possession stories. And I was all jealous of, Catholics and Protestants and Presbyterians and stuff who have all this imagery ingrained in that genre. And I thought it would be really interesting to have
exorcisms.
To have a demon story in a religion where they teach that exorcisms don't work. You're supposed to say Jehovah, but exorcism rituals are wrong. So what happens if that doesn't work? And so the premise of the story is that there's a Bethelite who is sent from, Brooklyn, New York. The story takes place in 2016 as the Warwick move is happening. He's sent to this rural congregation in Ohio, in a fictional town, and there's these people are dying under mysterious circumstances. The local group thinks it's elders, but is it? Is it actually demons or not? And then there's our co-protagonist, Cora. She is somebody who's been out of the organization for years. She was disfellowshipped, but she's a physically out, mentally in person, like we've talked about. And she's thought that she moved on with her life until her daughter starts acting like she might be demonized, and she starts worrying that maybe the group is right all along. So that's the premise of the story. Wholesome dread. I wrote the whole thing, and it'll hopefully be published mainstream at some point, but I've been talking about it on the channel for a few years, so I wanted to post it for free for people to read. So I'm posting chapters twice a month on Substack.
Cool. Look forward to seeing the book.
Thanks. Yeah, and also audio if you don't want to read the text. I'm recording myself reading the chapters.
You can use AI and like animate the chapters, do some voiceover, and make.
I'm too proud to let a robot narrate my work. I must read it myself.
You can read it yourself, but you can get AI to do the visuals, make a visual kind of movie out of it or something.
That's true. I'm too opposed to AI to do it. I'm too much of a Luddite.
Yeah, my brother was too until he started experimenting with it. But yeah, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Jake Vaughn, I want to thank you for your time. Good luck to you and all your ventures. Good luck to your wife and your marriage. And thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. It was really great being here. You asked really good questions. I appreciate it.